The dusty streets of Austin, Texas stretched out before Katherine Morgan like a final judgment. Each item she laid out on the worn blanket representing a piece of her heart she was being forced to let go. It was late summer in 1878, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the makeshift sail she had arranged in front of the general store, with permission from old Mr. Henderson, who had taken pity on her situation. Katherine's hands trembled as she smoothed down her faded blue dress, the nicest one she had left. Though it had been mended so many times, the original fabric was hard to distinguish from the patches. At 22 years old, she had never imagined her life would come to this moment, selling everything she held dear just to keep food on the table and a roof over her head for one more month. Her father's pocket watch gleamed in the sunlight, the silver case catching the attention of passers-by. He had carried it through the war, through building their ranch from nothing, through every triumph and hardship, until the fever took him 6 months ago. Next to it lay her mother's china tea set, delicate cups painted with tiny roses that had survived the journey from Virginia 20 years prior. There were books, her most treasured possessions, their leather bindings cracked, but their pages still holding the world she had escaped into during lonely nights. Her grandmother's quilt, stitched with care and love, folded neatly beside a collection of her mother's jewelry. Nothing extravagant, but each piece a memory she could ill afford to keep. The ranch had been everything to her family, but after her father died and the bank came calling with debts she had not known existed, Katherine found herself drowning in a sea of financial obligations she could not hope to meet. She had tried to run the ranch alone, but rustlers had taken half the cattle, and without her father's connections and reputation, buyers were scarce and prices were low. 3 weeks ago, the bank had foreclosed, and she had been given 30 days to vacate the property that had been her home since childhood. "How much for the watch?" a portly merchant asked, barely glancing at her face. $20, Katherine said, her voice steadier than she felt. It was worth twice that, but she needed quick sales, not negotiations. The merchant scoffed and moved on. Katherine blinked back tears, refusing to let them fall. She had cried enough in private. In public, she would maintain her dignity, even as she sold off piece after piece of her life. The morning dragged on with a few small sales. A woman bought 2 of the books for $1 each, and a young mother purchased the quilt for $5, far less than it was worth. But Katherine could see the woman's thin children and could not bring herself to ask for more. Each transaction felt like losing a little bit of her soul, but she forced a smile and thanked each buyer politely. It was just past noon when she heard the sound of horse hooves approaching at a leisurely pace. Katherine looked up to see a tall man dismounting from a beautiful chestnut mare, his movements fluid and practiced. He wore dusty trail clothes, a dark hat pulled low over his eyes, and when he pushed it back, she found herself looking into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. His face was weathered from sun and wind, probably somewhere in his mid-20s, with a strong jaw and a mouth that looked like it smiled often, though at the moment he was studying her makeshift sail with an intensity that made her nervous. "Afternoon, miss," he said, his voice deep and warm, with a hint of something that might have been Tennessee in his accent. "Good afternoon, sir. Please, feel free to look at anything that interests you." Katherine gestured to her spread of belongings, trying not to notice how his gaze lingered on her face before dropping to the items. He crouched down, his long legs folding easily as he examined the pocket watch first, turning it over in his large, calloused hands with surprising gentleness. "This is fine craftsmanship. Confederate officer's watch, if I am not mistaken." "It was my father's," Katherine heard herself say, then bit her lip. Buyers did not want stories. They wanted goods at the lowest possible price. The stranger looked up at her, those blue eyes seeing far more than she was comfortable with. "And you are selling it because you want to, or because you have to?" The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Katherine found herself answering honestly. "Because I have to. My father passed 6 months ago, and the ranch was foreclosed. I have 30 days to find somewhere else to live, and I need money for lodging and food while I search for employment." Something shifted in the stranger's expression, a tightening around his eyes that might have been anger or pain. He stood slowly, dusting off his hands on his pants, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "What else here was your father's?" "The watch, that leather journal, the rifle over there, and the saddle." Katherine pointed to each item, wondering why he was asking. "And your mother's things?" The tea set, the jewelry, most of the books, and some of the linens. She watched as he moved around the blanket, examining each item she named with the same careful attention he had given the watch. "And the rest?" he asked. "Mine, or my grandmother's. The quilt sold already. That was hers." Katherine felt a pang at the admission. She should have kept the quilt, should have held on to at least one thing, but practicality had won over sentimentality. The stranger was quiet for a long moment, standing with his hands on his hips, looking down at the collection of her life spread out on a dusty blanket in the Texas heat. Then he looked at her again, and Katherine saw decision crystallize in those blue eyes. "I will buy it all," he said simply. Katherine blinked, certain she had misheard. "I beg your pardon?" "Everything you have here. I will buy all of it. Name your price." Her mind raced, trying to calculate what she had hoped to get for everything combined. "Sir, that would be, altogether it would be considerable. I was hoping to get perhaps $200 for everything, though I know that is optimistic." "It is worth more than that," he said flatly. "300, and I want you to make me a promise." Katherine's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. $300 would give her time, breathing room, a chance to find proper employment, or perhaps even save enough to start over somewhere new. "What promise, sir?" "That you will use it wisely, that you will not let anyone take advantage of you, that you will find a safe place to stay and work that treats you fairly." He was already reaching into his jacket, pulling out a well-worn leather wallet. "I do not understand," Katherine said slowly. "You do not even know me. Why would you spend so much money on things you probably do not need or want?" The stranger counted out bills, his movements precise. "Let us just say, I know what it is like to lose everything that matters, and I know what it is like when someone gives you a chance to start over." He held out the money, $300 in cash, more money than Katherine had seen in months. She took it with shaking hands, unable to quite believe this was happening. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. I do not even know your name." "Harrison Matthews," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "And you are?" "Katherine Morgan. Kate. Most people call me Kate." She was staring at the money, at the salvation it represented, at the impossible gift this stranger had just given her. "Well, Miss Morgan, I am going to need some help transporting all of this. Where are you staying currently?" "I have a room at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house on Oak Street. It is paid through the end of the week." Katherine looked at the pile of belongings, then at his single horse. "You are right. It will take several trips, or perhaps we could rent a wagon from the livery." "I have a better idea," Harrison said. "You start packing things up carefully, and I will be back in 20 minutes. He was gone before she could respond, swinging up onto his mare and cantering off down the street. Katherine stood there, clutching $300 and wondering if she had just dreamed the entire encounter. But the money was real, solid and tangible in her hands, and she quickly tucked it into the small purse she wore on a string around her neck, hidden beneath her dress. She began carefully wrapping the china in the linens, her mind whirling. Harrison Matthews had just bought everything she owned without haggling, without the cold calculation she had seen in every other buyer's eyes. There had been something in his face when she mentioned losing her father, losing the ranch, something that spoke of understanding born from experience rather than pity. True to his word, Harrison returned in exactly 20 minutes, driving a small wagon pulled by 2 sturdy horses. He jumped down and immediately began helping her load items, handling each piece with care despite their being his purchases now. "You did not have to help," Katherine said as they worked together to secure the saddle. "These are your belongings now." Harrison paused, giving her a long look. "About that, I think there has been a misunderstanding, Miss Morgan." Katherine's stomach dropped. Was he going to ask for his money back? Demand something else in return? She had been a fool to think such generosity came without strings attached. "I did not buy these things because I wanted them," Harrison continued, his voice gentle. "I bought them so you would not have to sell them, so you would not have to watch strangers walk away with pieces of your heart and history." She stared at him, not comprehending. "But you gave me money, $300. And I want you to have that money. You need it. But you also need these things, Kate. They are your family's legacy, your memories. No amount of money is worth losing that." He reached into the wagon and pulled out her father's pocket watch, pressing it into her hands. "This belonged to your father. It should stay with you." Katherine looked down at the watch, feeling the familiar weight of it. seeing her father's initials engraved on the back, and something broke open inside her chest. The tears she had been holding back all morning, all week, all through the terrible months since her father's death, came flooding out. She sobbed, clutching the watch to her chest. And then Harrison's arms were around her, strong and steady, letting her cry into his dusty shirt, while he murmured soft, comforting words she could not quite make out through her tears. "I am sorry," she gasped when she could finally speak again. "I am so sorry. I should not. We barely know each other. This is not proper." "Proper can go hang," Harrison said firmly, though he released her and stepped back a respectful distance. "You have been carrying too much alone for too long. Sometimes a person just needs to break down before they can build themselves back up." Katherine wiped her eyes with her sleeve, probably ruining what little presentable appearance she had left, but finding she did not particularly care. "I cannot accept this. I cannot accept your money and keep my belongings. It is not right." "Then consider it a loan," Harrison said. "Pay me back when you can, if it makes you feel better. But right now, let us get all of this to the boarding house before Mrs. Patterson starts wondering if you are moving in permanently with all this furniture." Despite everything, Katherine laughed, a watery sound, but genuine. "There is not much furniture. Father had to sell most of that before he died, trying to keep the ranch afloat." They worked together in companionable silence, loading the wagon with practiced efficiency. Katherine kept stealing glances at Harrison, trying to understand this man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, all sharp angles and sun-weathered skin. But it was the kindness in his eyes and the gentleness of his hands with her precious belongings that made something flutter in her chest. The boarding house was only a 10-minute drive, and Mrs. Patterson came bustling out when she saw the wagon pull up, her round face creased with concern and curiosity. "Kate, dear, what is all this? And who is this gentleman?" Mrs. Patterson's eyes darted between them with the keen interest of a woman who prided herself on knowing everyone's business. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Mr. Harrison Matthews. He is helping me with some belongings I needed to retrieve." It was close enough to the truth without getting into the complicated reality of what had just happened. "Pleased to meet you, madam," Harrison said, tipping his hat with perfect courtesy. "I promise my intentions are entirely honorable, just helping Miss Morgan with some heavy lifting." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened immediately. She had a weakness for polite young men, especially ones with honest faces and good manners. "Well, that is very kind of you, Mr. Matthews. Kate's room is on the second floor, third door on the left. I will have my son help with the heavier items." Between Harrison, Mrs. Patterson's teenage son, James, and Katherine herself, they managed to get everything up to her small room in 3 trips. It was amazing how much space her belongings took up in the tiny chamber. The tea set went on the small table by the window. The books filled the empty shelf. Her father's rifle, after some consideration, was stored carefully under the bed. The jewelry and watch she tucked into the single drawer of the bedside table. When everything was settled and James had been tipped a quarter for his trouble, Harrison and Katherine stood in the narrow hallway outside her room, suddenly awkward with each other now that the immediate task was complete. "I do not know how to thank you," Katherine said quietly, aware that Mrs. Patterson was probably listening from somewhere nearby. The woman was kind but incurably nosy. "What you did today, it was beyond generous. It was the kindest thing anyone has done for me since my father passed." Harrison shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "I told you, I know what it is like to lose everything. 4 years ago, I lost my family's farm in Tennessee. Fire took the house, the barn, everything. We lost my mother in that fire, too." Katherine drew in a sharp breath. "Oh, Harrison, I am so sorry. My father and younger sister survived, but something in my father broke that day. He could not bear to start over, could not bear to stay in Tennessee with all those memories. He took my sister and moved to Missouri to live with my mother's brother. I struck out on my own, working odd jobs, cowboying, whatever would pay. Eventually, I saved enough to buy some land up north of here, about a 2-day ride. I have been building it up slowly, small herd of cattle, couple of horses. Nothing fancy, but it is mine." "That is remarkable," Katherine said, meaning it. She understood the pride of ownership, the satisfaction of building something from nothing. "You have accomplished so much in just 4 years." Harrison shrugged. "I have had help along the way. people who gave me chances when they did not have to. A rancher who taught me the cattle business, a horse trader who sold me my first mare at a fair price and let me pay it off over time, a widow who let me stay in her barn one winter in exchange for fixing up her property. Good people exist, Kate. Sometimes they show up exactly when you need them. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood. He was trying to be that person for her, the way others had been for him. "Will you stay in Austin?" Harrison asked. "Or do you have family elsewhere? I have an aunt in San Antonio, but we have not spoken in years. There was a falling out with my mother before she died. I could write to her, but I am not certain I would be welcome." Katherine leaned against the doorframe of her room, suddenly exhausted. The emotional weight of the day was catching up with her. "I suppose I will look for work here. Perhaps as a seamstress or a teacher. I have a decent education, and I am skilled with a needle." "Can you cook?" Harrison asked abruptly. Katherine blinked at the sudden change of subject. "Yes, quite well. My mother taught me, and I have been cooking for myself and running a household since I was 16 when she took ill." Harrison seemed to be weighing something in his mind, his brow furrowed in thought. Finally he spoke, the words coming out in a rush as if he had to say them before he lost his nerve. "My ranch needs a housekeeper, someone to cook, clean, help with the general running of the household. It is just me right now, and I am living in a half-finished house with meals that would shame a cowboy on the trail. The pay would be fair, room and board included, and you would have your own cabin, small but private. It is hard work, and the place is isolated, but you would be safe, and you would have time to figure out what you want to do next." Katherine's first instinct was to refuse. She barely knew this man. Going to work for him, living on his isolated ranch, would be improper at best and dangerous at worst if he turned out to be other than he seemed. But as she looked into Harrison's earnest face, saw the genuine offer of help with no hint of ulterior motive, she found herself hesitating. "I would pay you $30 a month," Harrison continued. "That is fair wage for the work, maybe a bit more. And like I said, you would have your own space. I am not suggesting anything improper, Kate. I am offering you honest work in a place where you would not have to sell off your memories to survive." $30 a month was more than fair. It was generous. In 6 months, she could save enough to have real choices about her future. She could stay in the area or move on. She could start a small business or continue working. The possibilities stretched out before her like a road she had thought was closed. "I would need to think about it," Katherine said slowly. "And I would want to see the place before I agreed to anything. I am not questioning your character, but I have to be practical." "Of course," Harrison said immediately. "I would not expect anything less. I need to head back tomorrow morning anyway. Why do not you come with me, see the ranch, see the cabin, and if it does not suit you, I will bring you right back to Austin. No obligation." It was reasonable. It was sensible. It was also terrifying and exciting in equal measure. "All right," Katherine heard herself say. "I will come see your ranch. But I am bringing my father's rifle, just so we are clear." Harrison grinned, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something approaching boyish. "I would think less of you if you did not. Smart woman traveling with a stranger should always be armed." They made arrangements for the morning. Harrison would return at dawn with the wagon, and they would make the 2-day journey north to his ranch. Katherine would pack a bag with essentials, and Mrs. Patterson, when informed of the plan, insisted on packing enough food for an army. "You can never be too careful," the older woman said, eyeing Harrison with the suspicious protectiveness of a mother hen. "And Mr. Matthews, you remember that this is a good girl from a good family. Any trouble, and you will have half of Austin coming after you." "No trouble, madam," Harrison assured her. "You have my word as a gentleman, and if you want, I can write down the location of my ranch and leave it with you. That way, someone knows where Kate is." This seemed to satisfy Mrs. Patterson, and she watched approvingly as Harrison carefully drew a map and wrote out directions to his property, including the names of the neighboring ranches. It was another mark in his favor, Katherine thought. A man with ill intentions would not leave such a clear trail. That evening, as Katherine packed her bag and tried to calm her racing thoughts, she found herself holding her father's pocket watch again, tracing the engraved initials with her fingertip. What would her father think of what she was about to do? Would he approve of her going off to work for a stranger, or would he be horrified at the impropriety? But then she thought about the ranch, about how her father had always talked about the importance of hard work and taking chances. He had left Virginia with nothing but determination and her mother's love, and he had built a life in Texas through sheer will and the help of good people along the way. Harrison's story was not so different. Maybe that was why she felt this strange sense of rightness about the whole situation. She slept fitfully that night, her dreams a confused jumble of her father's face, the ranch she had lost, and blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Dawn came cold and clear, the last gasp of summer giving way to the hint of fall in the air. Harrison arrived exactly when he said he would, driving the same wagon from yesterday, now equipped with supplies for the journey. Katherine was waiting on the front porch, her bag at her feet, and her father's rifle wrapped in canvas. "Ready?" Harrison asked, jumping down to help her with her bag. "Ready," Katherine confirmed, trying to project more confidence than she felt. The journey north took them through increasingly rough country, the civilized streets of Austin giving way to open prairie and rolling hills. Harrison proved to be an easy traveling companion, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the area. He knew the land well, the good water sources, the places where trouble often occurred, the neighboring ranches and their owners. "The Stocktons have the spread to the east of mine," Harrison explained as they rolled along. "Good people. Older couple with 3 sons, all married with families of their own. They have been ranching there for 15 years and know everything about cattle. Tom Stockton is the one who taught me most of what I know about the business." "And to the west?" Katherine asked, finding herself genuinely interested. "That would be the Reynolds place, though it is a bit farther out. Younger family, moved from Kansas about 3 years ago. They run more sheep than cattle, which caused some tension at first, but they are finding their way. Nice folks, keep to themselves, mostly." They stopped for lunch beside a creek, and Katherine unpacked some of Mrs. Patterson's food, while Harrison tended to the horses. It was oddly domestic, this simple act of sharing a meal in the middle of nowhere, and Katherine found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, biting into a thick slice of bread with butter. "What are your plans for it?" Harrison's face lit up in a way that made him look years younger. "Right now, I have about 50 head of cattle, room for maybe 200 eventually. The grazing is good, and there is a creek that runs through the property year-round. I have been building up the house, trying to make it solid before winter comes. Got the barn finished last spring, and there is a small cabin that the previous owner built for a hired hand. That is where you would stay if you decide to take the job." "The previous owner?" Katherine prompted. "Old prospector, who thought there might be silver on the property. Spent 10 years digging and found nothing but rock and frustration. When I came along with cash money, he was happy to sell and move on to chase new dreams in Colorado. Poor fellow, but his loss was my gain. The land is worth 10 times what I paid for it." "You sound like you love it," Katherine observed. "I do," Harrison said simply. "It is the first place that has felt like home since we lost the farm in Tennessee. I wake up every morning and know that every bit of work I do is for myself, building something that cannot be taken away by bad luck or fire or someone else's decisions. It is freedom, Kate, hard work and loneliness sometimes, but freedom." Katherine understood that feeling, or at least she had once. The ranch in Austin had felt that way when her parents were alive, when it was a family endeavor full of hope and hard work. Maybe Harrison's ranch could give her a taste of that again, even if it was not her own land. They talked through lunch and then continued on, the landscape growing more rugged and beautiful with each passing mile. Harrison pointed out a herd of wild horses in the distance, their manes flying as they ran, free and untamed. An eagle soared overhead, riding the thermal currents with effortless grace. This was Texas at its wildest and most magnificent, and Katherine felt something in her chest loosen and expand. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Harrison guided the wagon off the main trail and into a small canyon where a stand of cottonwood trees provided shelter. "We will camp here tonight," he announced. "There is water, and the trees will give us some cover if the wind picks up." Katherine helped set up camp, a process that felt surprisingly natural, despite her lack of experience. Harrison was patient and thorough in his explanations, showing her how to build a proper fire, where to place their bedrolls for maximum safety and comfort, how to secure the horses so they would not wander but could escape if predators came near. "You seem to know a lot about traveling rough," Katherine commented as they sat by the fire, eating a simple dinner of beans and bacon. 4 years of drifting will teach you that," Harrison said. "I slept under more stars than roofs during those first years. You learn quick or you do not survive." "Do you miss Tennessee?" Katherine asked softly. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. I miss what Tennessee was. I miss the farm before the fire. I miss my mother. But the place itself? No, too many ghosts, too much pain. Texas is my home now, for better or worse. I understand that, Katherine said. I loved the ranch in Austin, but after my father died, it stopped feeling like home. It just felt like a burden I could not carry, a reminder of everything I had lost and could not get back. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers while the stars came out overhead in a spectacular display. Katherine had brought her bedroll to the opposite side of the fire from Harrison, maintaining propriety even in the wilderness, but she felt safe in a way she had not expected. There was something fundamentally decent about Harrison Matthews, something solid and trustworthy. "Thank you," she said into the darkness, "for everything, for buying my things, for giving them back, for offering me a chance. I know I keep saying it, but I need you to understand how much it means." "You do not have to keep thanking me," Harrison replied, his voice carrying easily across the small campsite. "Good people help each other. That is how we survive out here. That is how we build something better than what we left behind." Katherine fell asleep to the sound of the fire crackling and the horses nickering softly to each other, and for the first time in months, she did not dream of loss and failure. She dreamed instead of possibilities. The second day of travel brought them into true ranch country, vast stretches of grassland dotted with cattle and the occasional homestead. Harrison pointed out the boundary markers for his land around mid-morning, and Katherine felt her pulse quicken with anticipation and nervousness. "It is not much to look at from the road," Harrison warned as they approached, "but once you see the whole spread, it has potential." The house came into view first, a sturdy structure of wood and stone that was clearly still being completed. The main frame was solid, the roof looked sound, but there were gaps where windows should be, and the front porch was half finished. Still, it was more than Katherine had expected, and she could see the quality of the workmanship. "You built this yourself?" she asked, impressed. "Most of it, with some help from Tom Stockton and his sons. I am no master carpenter, but it will stand through any storm." Harrison sounded proud, and he had every right to be. The barn was even more impressive, large and well constructed, with a fenced corral attached. As they approached, several horses came trotting over to investigate, and a few cattle grazed peacefully in the near pasture. But it was the small cabin set back behind the main house, nestled against a gentle slope and surrounded by wildflowers, that caught Katherine's attention. It was simple but charming, with a solid door, real glass windows, and a small porch just big enough for a chair. Harrison helped her down from the wagon and led her to the cabin, producing a key from his pocket. "I cleaned it out yesterday before I left for Austin. It is not fancy, but it is sound and dry. Previous owner used it for storage mostly, but it was built as living quarters." He unlocked the door and stepped back to let Katherine enter first. The interior was small but cozy. A single room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed frame, a small table with 2 chairs, and some shelves built into the walls. There was even a window that looked out toward the creek Harrison had mentioned, currently sparkling in the late morning sun. "It is perfect," Katherine said, and meant it. The space was clean, private, and infinitely better than the cramped room at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. She could see herself here, making this little cabin into a home. "The main house is where you would do most of the work," Harrison explained, leading her across the yard. "Kitchen is functional, but basic. I have been eating mostly beans and whatever I can cook over an open fire, which is a sad state of affairs for a grown man. There is a root cellar for storage, and I have been trying to build up supplies before winter." The kitchen in the main house was indeed basic, but had good bones. A large cast-iron stove dominated one wall, and there was a substantial table that could seat 6 people easily. The cupboards were mostly empty, but the dishes that were there were clean, and Katherine could see the potential. "I would need supplies to cook properly," she said, already mentally cataloging what would be required. Flour, sugar, salt, lard, vegetables, if you have a garden, or access to fresh produce, spices, herbs, canned goods for the winter. "Make a list of everything you need, and we will go into the nearest town tomorrow. It is a half-day ride, small place called Whitmore, not as big as Austin, but they have a decent general store and a market twice a week." Harrison was watching her carefully, trying to gauge her reaction. Katherine walked through the rest of the house, noting the 2 bedrooms upstairs, both sparsely furnished but livable, the half-finished parlor, the back room that Harrison was using as an office of sorts, with a desk covered in papers and ledgers. It was clear he was serious about this ranch, about making it into something substantial. "So," Harrison asked when they were back in the kitchen, "what do you think? Is this something you could see yourself doing?" Katherine looked around the kitchen, then out the window at the cabin that would be hers, at the vast expanse of land stretching in every direction, at the man standing nervously by the door, waiting for her answer. She thought about Austin, about the empty boarding house room and the uncertain future. She thought about her father's advice to take chances when good ones presented themselves. "I will take the job," she said firmly. $30 a month, room and board, and my own space. I will cook, clean, and help run the household. But I want to be clear, Mr. Matthews. This is a professional arrangement. I am your employee, nothing more." Relief and something else, something that might have been disappointment, flashed across Harrison's face. "Of course. Strictly professional. You have my word, Kate." They shook hands on it, a formal gesture that somehow felt momentous, like they were sealing more than just an employment agreement. Katherine felt the warmth of his large hand engulfing her smaller one, the calluses that spoke of hard work, the strength tempered with gentleness. They spent the rest of the day getting Katherine settled into the cabin. Harrison helped her carry in her belongings from the wagon, including all the precious items he had bought, and returned to her. The tea set looked perfect on the small shelf above the fireplace. The books filled the emptiness and made the space feel like hers. Her father's watch went into the drawer of the bedside table, where she could take it out and hold it whenever she needed to feel close to him. That evening, Katherine cooked her first meal in Harrison's kitchen. It was simple fare: fried potatoes and onions with bacon and eggs, biscuits made from the last of Mrs. Patterson's care package, but it was hot and filling and infinitely better than whatever Harrison had been eating. "This is amazing," Harrison said around a mouthful of biscuit, his eyes closed in pleasure. "Kate, I think I might have hired an angel in disguise." Katherine laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Wait until you taste my pot roast or my apple pie. Then you can talk about angels." They ate at the big kitchen table, the lamp casting a warm glow in the gathering dusk, and talked about plans for the ranch, for the coming winter, for all the work that needed to be done. Harrison had ideas and ambition, but also a realistic understanding of his limitations. He needed help, and not just with cooking and cleaning. He needed someone to handle the household finances, to manage supplies, to think about the 1,000 details that went into running a successful ranch. "I can do that," Katherine said when he explained his struggles with keeping track of expenses and supplies. "My father taught me bookkeeping. I managed the ranch accounts for the last few years, before he died." "That would be worth more than $30 a month," Harrison said immediately. "If you're going to take on that work too, I should pay you more." "We can discuss it after a trial period," Katherine said practically. "Let us see how this first month goes, make sure we work well together, and then we can renegotiate if needed." It was the beginning of a partnership, though neither of them quite realized it yet. That first week passed in a blur of activity. Katherine threw herself into organizing the household, cleaning neglected corners, taking inventory of supplies, and cooking meals that made Harrison look at her with awe and gratitude. She made the trip into Whitmore with him and spent a productive hour in the general store, purchasing what they would need for the next month, while Harrison handled business with the feed and tack shop. Whitmore was a small town, dusty and rough around the edges, but the people were friendly enough. A few stares followed Katherine as she shopped, curious looks from townsfolk wondering who this newcomer was and what she was doing with Harrison Matthews. Katherine held her head high and ignored the whispers, focusing on her tasks. "They are just curious," Harrison said on the ride back to the ranch, the wagon loaded with supplies. "Small town, everyone knows everyone's business. Give it a few weeks and they will move on to the next piece of gossip." "I am not worried about gossip," Katherine said, though she was a little. "I know what I am doing is proper and right. Let them think what they want." But as the days turned into weeks, Katherine found that what had started as a simple employment arrangement was becoming something more complicated. She and Harrison fell into an easy routine, working side by side during the day, sharing meals and conversation in the evenings. Harrison was unfailingly respectful, never overstepping boundaries. But there was a warmth between them that went beyond employer and employee. Katherine found herself looking forward to his return each evening, when he came in from working with the cattle or mending fences. She took pride in having dinner ready, in seeing his face light up when he smelled whatever she had cooking. They would sit at the kitchen table long after the meal was finished, talking about everything and nothing. Harrison told her stories about his wandering years, about the characters he had met and the places he had seen. Katherine shared memories of her childhood on the ranch, of her parents and the life they had built. One evening, about 3 weeks into her employment, they were sitting on the half-finished porch of the main house, watching the sun set over the prairie. It had become a habit, this quiet time after dinner, when the work was done and the night was just beginning. "I am glad you decided to stay," Harrison said suddenly, his voice quiet but intense. "This place was just a house before you came. Now it is starting to feel like a home." Katherine's heart did a complicated flip in her chest. "I am glad I stayed too. I was so angry at first. Angry at my father for dying. Angry at the bank. Angry at fate for taking everything away. But maybe losing the ranch was not the end. Maybe it was just a door closing so another one could open." "That is a good way to look at it," Harrison said. He was sitting close enough that Katherine could feel the warmth of him in the cool evening air. "I felt the same way after the fire. Thought my life was over at 19. Turned out it was just beginning in a way I never expected." "How old are you now?" Katherine asked, realizing she had never actually asked. 26. Birthday was last month. Not that I celebrated much. Just another day of work." Harrison smiled ruefully. "What about you?" 22. My birthday is in December, right before Christmas. My mother always made it special, made sure I had my own day before the holiday celebrations took over. The memory was bittersweet, tinged with loss, but also with love. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Katherine was acutely aware of Harrison beside her, of the way her pulse quickened when he was near, of the way her thoughts kept drifting to what it would be like if this was not just an employment arrangement, but something more. It was dangerous thinking, and she knew it. She could not afford to develop feelings for her employer. It would complicate everything, potentially ruin the first real stability she had found since her father's death. But her heart, it seemed, was not listening to reason. The first real test of their growing relationship came a week later when a storm rolled in from the north, one of those sudden, violent autumn storms that could tear across the prairie with little warning. Katherine had been in the main house, working on mending some of Harrison's shirts, when the wind picked up and the sky turned an ominous green-gray. Harrison came running in from the barn, his face tense. "We need to get the cattle into the near pasture, closer to shelter. This storm is going to be bad. Can you help me?" Katherine did not hesitate. She dropped the mending and followed him out into the rising wind. Together, they worked to herd the cattle, Harrison on horseback and Katherine on foot, guiding the nervous animals toward the protection of the tree line and the windbreak of the barn. Rain began to fall in fat, cold drops that quickly turned into a downpour. By the time they got the last of the cattle secured and the horses into the barn, they were both soaked to the skin and shivering. Lightning split the sky, and thunder followed so close it shook the ground. Harrison grabbed Katherine's hand and pulled her toward the main house, running through the sheeting rain. They burst through the door, dripping water everywhere, and Harrison immediately set about building up the fire in the kitchen stove, while Katherine tried to wring out her skirts with shaking hands. "You need to get into dry clothes before you catch your death," Harrison said, his teeth chattering slightly. "Go to the cabin and change. I will do the same here." But when Katherine opened the door to head to the cabin, a blast of wind nearly knocked her off her feet. The storm had intensified, and visibility was nearly zero. Harrison was beside her in an instant, pulling her back inside and slamming the door. "You are not going out in that," he said firmly. "You will stay here until it passes." "But I do not have dry clothes here," Katherine protested, even as she shivered violently. Harrison was already moving toward the stairs. "I will find something. Just wait here and stay by the fire." He returned a few minutes later with a bundle of clothes, his own shirt and pants, far too large for her, but dry and warm. He handed them to her, and then very deliberately turned his back, facing the wall. "I will not look. Change quickly before you freeze." Katherine's hands fumbled with the wet fabric of her dress, her fingers clumsy with cold. It felt impossibly intimate, changing clothes in the same room as Harrison, even with his back turned, but practicality won out over propriety. She stripped out of her wet things and pulled on his shirt, which hung nearly to her knees. then rolled up the pants as best she could. They were absurdly large, but they were dry and they smelled like Harrison, like leather and hay and something uniquely him. "I am decent," she said, and Harrison turned around. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her swimming in his clothes, and something flickered across his face too quickly for her to name. "I will step into the other room and change myself," he said, his voice oddly rough. "You stay by the fire." The storm raged outside for hours, shaking the house with its fury. Katherine and Harrison huddled in the kitchen, the warmest room, drinking hot coffee and listening to the wind howl. At some point, Katherine's shivering finally stopped, the warmth of the fire and the dry clothes seeping into her bones. "Thank you for helping today," Harrison said, breaking a long silence. "With the cattle. You did not have to do that. It is not part of your job." "We are partners in this, are we not?" Katherine said. "You need those cattle to survive. That means I need them to survive. Besides, I grew up on a ranch. I know how to work." Harrison was looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "You are remarkable, Kate. Do you know that? Brave and smart and capable and kind. Any man would be lucky to have you by his side." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Katherine felt heat that had nothing to do with the fire spreading through her chest. "Harrison," she began, not sure what she was going to say. But before she could continue, a tremendous crack of lightning struck somewhere very close, and the whole house shook. They both jumped, and then Harrison was moving, checking the windows and doors, making sure everything was secure. The moment passed, but its echo remained, a shift in the air that changed something fundamental between them. The storm finally blew itself out near midnight. Harrison insisted that Katherine take his bed upstairs while he slept on the settee in the parlor, a compromise that preserved propriety while keeping them both warm and safe. Katherine was too exhausted to argue much, and she fell asleep almost instantly in the unfamiliar bed, wrapped in blankets that smelled like Harrison. When she woke in the morning, the sun was streaming through the window and the world looked washed clean. She came downstairs to find Harrison already awake, standing in the kitchen with her dress and undergarments hanging neatly by the fire to finish drying. "Checked on the animals first thing," he reported, looking tired but satisfied. "Everyone made it through fine. Couple of tree branches down, but no real damage. We were lucky." Katherine moved to start breakfast, falling back into routine, even though everything felt different now. As she cooked, Harrison sat at the table, watching her with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of every movement. "Kate," he said finally, just as she was plating eggs and bacon. "About last night, what I said, I meant it. You are remarkable, and I think we need to talk about what is happening between us." Katherine's hand trembled slightly as she set the plate in front of him. "What do you think is happening between us?" Harrison stood, moving closer but not touching, respecting the space between them, even as his eyes said everything words could not. "I think I am falling in love with you. I know that is not what we agreed to. I know you came here as my employee, and I promised to keep everything professional. But, Kate, these past weeks, getting to know you, watching you bring life to this place, talking with you every evening, I cannot help how I feel." Katherine's heart was thundering so loud she was sure he could hear it. "I do not know what to say. This is so complicated. You are my employer. I depend on you for my livelihood." "I know," Harrison said quietly. "And if you do not feel the same way, if you want to keep things strictly professional, I will respect that. I will never make you uncomfortable or put your position here in jeopardy because of my feelings. But I had to be honest with you. I cannot pretend anymore." Katherine looked at this man who had appeared in her life like a miracle, who had bought all her precious belongings just to give them back, who had offered her safety and work and respect when she needed it most. She thought about the way her heart lifted when she heard his voice, the way she found excuses to spend time with him, the way she had started thinking of his dreams for the ranch as their dreams. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she whispered, the words terrifying and liberating all at once. "But Harrison, I am scared. I lost everything once already. What if this does not work? What if things change and I lose this place? Lose you?" Harrison closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "I cannot promise that life will not throw challenges at us, but I can promise that I will never take advantage of you, never make you feel like your position here depends on anything other than your skills and hard work. And I can promise that Whatever we build together, we will build as equals, as partners. Partners, Katherine repeated, testing the word. It felt right, more right than employer and employee, more right than anything she had felt since her father died. Partners, Harrison confirmed. In the ranch, in life, in whatever the future holds. That is what I am offering you, Kate. Not just a job, not just a home, but a future we build together. Katherine looked up into those blue eyes that had seen straight through to her soul from the very first moment, and she knew what her answer had to be. Life was too short, too uncertain, to turn away from love when it presented itself. Her father had taught her to be brave, to take chances on things that mattered. Yes, she said simply. Yes, let us be partners in every way. Harrison's smile was like the sun coming out after a storm, bright and warm and full of promise. He lifted her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a courtly gesture that made her heart flutter. You have made me happier than I thought possible, Kate Morgan. We should probably eat breakfast before it gets cold, Katherine said, suddenly shy despite everything they had just said to each other. Harrison laughed, the sound rich and joyful. Practical even in the midst of declarations of love. That is one of the things I adore about you. They ate breakfast together, as they had every morning for weeks, but everything was different now. Every glance held meaning, every accidentally brushed hand sent sparks through Kate's body. They were courting now, properly courting, and the knowledge filled her with a giddy excitement she had not felt since she was a girl. The following weeks passed in a golden haze of work and courtship. Harrison brought Kate wildflowers from the prairie, and she baked him pies and cookies that made him groan with pleasure. They took walks along the creek in the evenings, talking and dreaming about the future. Harrison taught Kate to ride his gentlest mare, laughing when she wobbled in the saddle but never mocking, always encouraging. Kate showed Harrison her bookkeeping system and helped him plan for the coming year's cattle sales. They visited the Stocktons, and Kate was warmly welcomed by the family. Mrs. Stockton, a hearty woman with kind eyes, took Kate aside at one point and said bluntly, "That boy has been alone too long. You are good for him. I can see it in his face. He has not smiled this much since he came to Texas. He is good for me, too," Kate admitted. "I did not think I would ever feel hopeful again after losing my father and the ranch. But Harrison makes me believe that good things can still happen." "Hold on to that feeling," Mrs. Stockton advised. "Life out here is hard. You need someone who reminds you what you are working for." As autumn deepened and winter approached, Harrison worked on finishing the house, determined to have it fully ready before the cold weather truly set in. Kate helped where she could, holding boards steady while he hammered, painting trim, hanging curtains she had sewn from fabric purchased in Whitmore. The house was becoming beautiful, a real home rather than a bachelor's rough shelter. One evening in late November, as they sat on the now finished porch watching the sunset, Harrison turned to Kate with a serious expression. "I need to ask you something important, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." Kate's stomach fluttered with nerves and anticipation. "What is it?" Harrison took both her hands in his calloused thumbs rubbing circles on her skin. "Kate, I know we have only known each other for a few months. I know by some standards that is too fast. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of this. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build this ranch with you, raise a family with you, grow old with you. Kate Morgan, will you marry me?" Kate's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Yes, Harrison, I will marry you. I love you so much." Harrison whooped with joy and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he kissed her for the first time, a sweet, tender kiss that promised a lifetime of love and partnership. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Whitmore, with the Stockton family and a handful of other local ranchers and their families in attendance. Kate wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Stockton helped her make, altered from one of her own wedding outfits with new lace and ribbons. Harrison wore his Sunday best, his hair neatly trimmed and his face shining with happiness. The ceremony was brief but moving. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Harrison kissed his bride, Kate felt like her heart might burst from joy. This was a new beginning, a second chance at the kind of life and love she had thought was lost to her forever. The wedding celebration was held at the Stockton Ranch, with music and dancing and food that seemed to go on forever. Kate danced with Harrison, with Tom Stockton, with several of the Stockton sons, laughing and twirling until she was breathless. Harrison kept pulling her back to his side, unable to stop touching her, as if he needed to constantly reassure himself that she was real and truly his wife now. As the sun set on their wedding day, Harrison and Kate rode back to their ranch now, together. Harrison carried her over the threshold of the main house, both of them laughing at the tradition, and Kate knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work and deep happiness. They worked side by side to build up the ranch, increasing the cattle herd, improving the property, making plans for the future. Kate proved to be not just a skilled housekeeper and cook, but a talented rancher in her own right, with an eye for good cattle and a head for the business side of things. Harrison deferred to her judgment often, trusting her instincts and valuing her input. The winter was cold, but they weathered it together, spending long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other from Kate's books, planning for spring, making love, and dreaming of the children they hoped to have someday. Harrison never tired of telling Kate how much he loved her, how grateful he was that he had found her that day in Austin, selling pieces of her heart to survive. "It was the best day of my life," he said one snowy evening as they lay in bed, Kate curled against his chest. "Walking up and seeing you there, so brave and so heartbroken, trying to keep your dignity while your world fell apart. I knew immediately that you were special, that I wanted to know you, to help you if I could." "I thought you were crazy," Kate admitted with a laugh, "buying everything without haggling, paying far more than anything was worth. I could not understand why." "Because I saw myself in you," Harrison said quietly. "I remembered what it was like to lose everything, to have nothing left but determination and hope. And I remembered the people who helped me when I needed it most. Returning your things to you was not even a question in my mind. They were yours, your family's. I could not let you lose them." "You gave me more than my belongings back that day," Kate said, lifting her head to look into his eyes. "You gave me hope. You gave me a future. You gave me love. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that." Spring came with a rush of green and new life, and with it came news that made Kate both nervous and elated. She was pregnant, expecting their first child in early autumn. Harrison was beside himself with joy, immediately becoming overprotective and insisting that Kate should not work too hard, should rest more, should let him take over more of the household tasks. "I am pregnant, not broken," Kate said with exasperation and affection when Harrison tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "Women have been having babies while running households and ranches for all of human history. I am fine." But she loved his attentiveness, even when it was overbearing. She loved the way he would rest his hand on her growing belly, talking to the baby about the ranch and all the things they would do together. She loved planning the nursery in one of the upstairs bedrooms, sewing tiny clothes and blankets with help from Mrs. Stockton and some of the other ranch wives who had become her friends. The birth, when it came in late September, was long and difficult. Harrison paced outside the bedroom door while Mrs. Stockton and another experienced midwife attended Kate. When he finally heard the cry of his newborn child, he burst into the room, his face wild with worry and hope. "You have a son," Mrs. Stockton announced with a tired but happy smile. "Strong and healthy, with a good set of lungs on him." Harrison moved to the bed where Kate lay exhausted but glowing, their son cradled in her arms. He was perfect, with a dusting of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. Kate looked up at Harrison with tears in her eyes and said, "Meet your son. I thought we could name him Henry, after my father." "Henry Matthews," Harrison said, testing the name. His own eyes were wet with tears as he gently touched his son's soft head. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Kate. Thank you for this incredible gift." Life with a baby was chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Harrison proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with Henry in the middle of the night, changing diapers without complaint, making silly faces to coax smiles from his son. Kate watched her husband with their child and fell in love with him all over again, deeper and truer than before. The ranch continued to prosper. Harrison's hard work and Kate's smart management were paying off. They were able to expand their herd significantly, hire a couple of ranch hands to help with the work, and even make improvements to the property. The house was fully finished, beautiful, and comfortable, a real family home. 2 years after Henry's birth, Kate gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Lily after Harrison's mother. She was a delicate baby with Kate's dark eyes and Harrison's smile, and her birth completed their family in a way that felt perfect and right. One evening when Henry was 5 and Lily was 3, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained through the years. Henry was chattering about a calf he had helped his father with, and Lily was playing with a doll Kate had made for her. Harrison had his arm around Kate's shoulders, and she was leaning into his warmth and strength. "Do you ever think about that day in Austin?" Harrison asked quietly. "When I found you selling everything?" "Sometimes," Kate admitted. "It feels like a lifetime ago. I was so lost then, so scared and alone. I could not see any path forward." "And now?" Harrison prompted. Kate looked around at the ranch they had built together, at their beautiful children, at the life they had created from the ashes of loss and hardship. "Now I see that sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best thing that ever happens to you. Losing the ranch, having to sell my belongings, it all led me here. To you, to this family, to this life. I would not change a single thing, even the painful parts, because they brought me to this moment." Harrison kissed the top of her head, his arm tightening around her. "You know what the best part is? We are just getting started. We have so many more years ahead of us, so many more memories to make, so much more life to live together." "Together," Kate echoed, the word full of promise and contentment. "Always together." The years continued to pass in a rhythm of work and love and family. Henry grew into a strong, capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Lily became a spirited, intelligent girl with a gift for numbers who helped her mother manage the ranch accounts. Harrison and Kate added 2 more children to their family, twin boys named Jacob and Thomas, who were born when Kate was 30, and kept everyone on their toes with their boundless energy and mischievous natures. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for quality cattle and honest dealings. Harrison's reputation as a fair and skilled rancher grew, and Kate was respected as a sharp businesswoman and a pillar of the small but growing community around Whitmore. They were invited to join civic organizations to help make decisions about roads and schools and development. They were part of building something bigger than just their own spread, helping to shape the future of the area. But through all the success and growth, Harrison and Kate never forgot where they had started. Every year on the anniversary of the day they met, Harrison would give Kate a small gift, something simple and meaningful, and remind her that buying her belongings was the best decision he ever made. "Second best," Kate would always correct with a smile. "The best decision was giving them back to me." "Third best," Harrison would counter. "The best was convincing you to marry me. Second best was giving your things back. Third was buying them in the first place." It became a familiar argument, one they had every year with variations, always ending in laughter and kisses and renewed declarations of love. Kate's father's pocket watch remained one of her most treasured possessions. She passed it to Henry on his 18th birthday, along with stories about the grandfather he had never met, about the ranch in Austin, and the legacy of hard work and integrity that came with the watch. "Your grandfather would have loved you," Kate told her son, her eyes misty with memory and pride. "He would have been so proud of the man you are becoming, of the way you love this land and work so hard to make it thrive." "I wish I could have known him," Henry said, turning the watch over in his hands, studying the engraved initials. "But I know him through you and through the stories you tell, and I promise to honor his memory by being the kind of man he was, the kind of man you and Father have taught me to be." The china tea set that had been Kate's mother's was given to Lily when she married a young lawyer from Whitmore, a good man who reminded Kate a bit of Harrison, with his earnest face and kind eyes. Kate watched her daughter pour tea from the delicate cups at her own table, in her own home in town, and felt the circle of life completing itself in beautiful ways. When Kate and Harrison's children began having children of their own, the ranch rang with the laughter of grandchildren, small feet running through the house, young voices calling for Grandpa to show them the horses, or Grandma to tell them stories. Harrison, now in his 50s, still worked the ranch, but with more help from Henry and the hands they employed. Kate, her dark hair now streaked with silver, spent her days managing the household, teaching her granddaughters to cook and sew, watching her grandsons learn to ride and rope. One evening, as they sat on the porch in the same spot where they had spent so many evenings over the years, watching yet another spectacular Texas sunset, Kate reached over and took Harrison's hand. His hair was fully gray now, his face deeply lined from decades in the sun, but his blue eyes were as warm and loving as they had been the day he first saw her in Austin. "Do you remember what you said to me the night you proposed?" Kate asked. "I said a lot of things that night," Harrison replied with a smile. "I was nervous as a colt in a thunderstorm, worried you might say no. You said you wanted to spend the rest of your life with me, to build the ranch with me, to raise a family with me, to grow old with me," Kate recited, the words burned into her memory. "You have kept every one of those promises, Harrison Matthews. We built this ranch into something amazing. We raised 4 incredible children, and we have grown old together, and it has been even better than I imagined." Harrison lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it with the same gentleness he had shown on the day he proposed. "The story is not over yet, Kate. We still have more years, more sunsets, more memories to make. I plan to love you until my last breath, and then some. And I plan to love you just as long," Kate said softly. "Thank you for finding me that day. Thank you for seeing me when I was at my lowest. Thank you for giving me back not just my belongings, but my hope, my future, my everything." "Thank you for saying yes," Harrison replied, "for taking a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than sense and a half-finished ranch in the middle of nowhere. You made all of this possible, Kate. Every good thing in my life came from the day I met you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold and purple. Inside the house, they could hear their daughter-in-law starting dinner, their grandchildren playing some noisy game, Henry discussing cattle prices with one of the ranch hands. It was the sound of family, of life being lived fully and well. Kate rested her head on Harrison's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. This was her home, not because of the land or the house or even the family, though all of those things mattered deeply. This was home because Harrison was here, because they had built it together from nothing but love and hope and hard work. The ranch that had started as one man's dream had become a legacy, something that would continue through their children and grandchildren and beyond. But more than the land or the cattle or the success, what Kate and Harrison had built was a love that had weathered storms and struggles and emerged stronger for it. They had taken broken pieces and made something whole, had found each other when both were lost, and had created a life more beautiful than either could have imagined. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Harrison stood and offered Kate his hand, pulling her to her feet. "Come on, Mrs. Matthews. Let us go have dinner with our family and count our blessings." Kate took his hand, as she had taken it so many times over the decades, and let him lead her inside to the warmth and light and love that filled every corner of the home they had built together. And as they sat down to dinner, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Kate looked around the table and knew with absolute certainty that every hardship, every loss, every painful moment that had led her to that dusty street in Austin had been worth it for this, for him, for the life they had created together. The cowboy who had bought everything she loved and given it all back had given her something far more precious in return, something she would treasure for the rest of her days. He had given her a second chance, a new beginning, and a love that would echo through generations, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and 2 hearts brave enough to take a chance on each other. Years later, when Kate was in her 70s and Harrison in his late 70s, they were still on that ranch, still holding hands on the porch, still watching sunsets together. Their grandchildren had grandchildren now, and the ranch had expanded far beyond what they had ever dreamed. Henry ran the operation with skill and pride, but he always deferred to his parents on major decisions, valuing their wisdom and experience. On the 50th anniversary of the day Kate and Harrison met, the family threw a massive celebration. People came from all over Texas, friends and neighbors and family, to honor the couple whose love story had become something of a legend in the area. The tale of the cowboy who bought a desperate woman's belongings just to return them had been told and retold, growing with each telling, but always centered on the truth of an act of kindness that changed 2 lives forever. Kate and Harrison stood before their assembled loved ones, holding hands as they had for 50 years, and Harrison gave a speech that left barely a dry eye in the crowd. 50 years ago today, I rode into Austin looking for supplies and found something infinitely more valuable. I found the woman who would become my partner in every sense of the word, who would make me a better man, who would give me a family and a purpose and a reason to wake up grateful every single morning. I often wonder what would have happened if I had ridden past that street, if I had not stopped to see what she was selling, if I had not felt compelled to help. I would have missed out on the greatest adventure of my life. Kate Morgan, now Kate Matthews, has been my love, my friend, my business partner, the mother of my children, and the reason for every good thing in my life. If I could go back to that young man riding into Austin, I would tell him that he was about to meet his destiny, and that every day forward would be a gift. Kate, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, stood and took her turn to speak. I was selling everything I loved that day, piece by piece, believing that I had to let go of my past to have any kind of future. And then this stranger appeared and taught me that sometimes the answer is not letting go, but holding on, not moving forward alone, but finding someone to walk beside you. Harrison gave me back my belongings, but more than that, he gave me back my faith in goodness, in the kindness of strangers, in the possibility of love when you least expect it. These 50 years have been the greatest blessing of my life. Through good times and hard times, through raising children and building a business, through every challenge and every joy, Harrison has been my constant, my rock, my love. I would not trade a single moment, and I look forward to however many more years we are given, because every day with him is a gift. The celebration went long into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren danced together, and Kate and Harrison took a turn around the floor, moving slowly but surely, still in sync after all these years. As the party wound down and the last guest departed, Kate and Harrison found themselves once again on their porch, looking out over the land that had been their life's work. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light over the prairie. "No regrets?" Harrison asked, a question he had asked periodically over the years. "Not a single one," Kate answered, as she always did. "You?" "Only that I did not find you sooner," Harrison said. "But then again, maybe we found each other at exactly the right time, when we were both ready to appreciate what we had." Kate nodded, leaning into her husband's embrace. "Everything happens for a reason. I lost the Austin ranch so I could find this one. I lost my father so I could learn to stand on my own. I had to hit rock bottom so I could appreciate being lifted up. And you had to lose your family's farm so you could build this place, so you could be in Austin that day, so you could be the person who understood what I needed without me having to ask. We were always meant to find each other," Harrison said softly. "Across all the miles and all the circumstances, we were always going to end up right here, right now, together." They stayed on the porch until the moon was high in the sky, remembering and dreaming, grateful for the past and hopeful for whatever future remained to them. Their love story had started with an act of unexpected kindness on a dusty Austin street, and it would continue until their last breaths, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and two souls brave enough to love fully and completely. When they finally went inside to sleep, Harrison helped Kate up the stairs, his movements slower than they once were, but still steady, still strong enough to support her when she needed it. They had helped each other up countless stairs over the decades, and they would continue to do so for as long as they were able. As they lay in bed, Kate's head on Harrison's shoulder in the position they had slept in for 50 years, Harrison whispered, "I love you, Kate Matthews, today, tomorrow, and forever." "I love you, Harrison Matthews," Kate whispered back. "Thank you for being my hero, my partner, my everything." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, dreaming of dusty streets and pocket watches, of cattle and children, of sunsets and starlight, of a love that had started with one man, seeing one woman at her lowest moment, and deciding that kindness was more valuable than profit, that humanity was more important than convenience, that sometimes the best investment you can make is in another person's hope. The ranch they built stood as a monument to that love, but more than that, the family they created carried forward the lessons they had learned. Henry taught his children the value of compassion and hard work. Lily taught hers the importance of education and smart business practices. Jacob and Thomas, the twins, grew up to be ranchers like their father, carrying on the family tradition with their own children. And all of them, every child and grandchild and great-grandchild, knew the story of how Grandpa Harrison had found Grandma Kate selling everything she loved, had bought it all, and had returned it all to her that very same day, along with his heart. It was a story about loss and redemption, about kindness and love, about two people who found each other when they both needed finding. It was a story that would be told for generations, each retelling adding new layers, but always returning to the essential truth at its core. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best moments, if we are brave enough to walk through them. Sometimes strangers become family, and sometimes a single act of kindness can change the entire trajectory of two lives. Sometimes love appears in the most unexpected places, wearing dusty trail clothes and riding a chestnut mare, carrying the possibility of a future neither person dared to dream. Kate Morgan and Harrison Matthews lived out their days on that Texas ranch, surrounded by family and legacy, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting and true. When Harrison passed away at 82, Kate held his hand and whispered all the words of love and gratitude that had filled 54 years of marriage. When Kate followed him 6 months later, unable to bear the separation, their children gathered around her bed and sang the old hymns she had taught them, sending her off to join the man who had been her heart and soul for more than half a century. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple headstones that bore their names and dates and a single line that Henry chose: partners in love and life, together, always. The pocket watch that had started it all, that had been sold and bought and returned, was passed to the eldest great-grandson, along with the instruction to honor the legacy of kindness and courage it represented. And on certain evenings, when the sun sets over the Texas prairie in shades of gold and pink and purple, the family swears they can see two figures standing on the porch of the old ranch house, holding hands and watching the sunset together, their love transcending even death, eternal as the land itself, a reminder that some bonds are too strong to be broken by anything, even time. The story of Kate and Harrison Matthews became more than just a family legend. It became a reminder of what is truly valuable in life, not the possessions we accumulate, but the connections we forge, the love we give and receive, the kindness we show to strangers who might become something infinitely more precious. It was a story about seeing people at their most vulnerable and choosing to help rather than exploit, about recognizing that sometimes the most valuable thing you can give someone is not money, but hope, not charity, but dignity, not pity, but partnership. In a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving, especially in the rough and tumble days of the Wild West, Kate and Harrison's story stood as proof that goodness existed, that love could flourish even in the hardest circumstances, that two broken people could heal each other and build something beautiful from the shattered pieces of their former lives. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations as a beacon of hope and a testament to the enduring power of love. And so, the story lived on, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires, at weddings and anniversaries, whenever someone needed to be reminded that happy endings were possible, that love could be found, that kindness could change the world one person at a time. The story of the cowboy who found a woman selling everything she loved, who bought it all and returned it all to her that very same day, and who ended up giving her something far more valuable than any possession could ever be: a lifetime of love, partnership, and happiness that echoed through the generations as a reminder of what truly matters in life.